matter. And they really fucking matter. There's like 4 things that matter. And they really fucking matter. I mean, objectively. I mean, you should care. Especially you. If you thought about it for 5 fucking minutes.
Welcome to episode 94 of the Out of Voices podcast. We're your hosts, Keem, Ez, and Ari.
Woo!
Yay.
And we are back, everyone. After another week, we have survived what seems to be apparently the beginning, the possible beginning of another international war. So that's fun thing to think about.
Yeah.
Oh, joy.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys heard that, but yesterday / this morning, the president was just like, yeah, I was gonna bomb Iran yesterday, but I decided not to.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's fun. That's the person you want with the finger on a trigger right there.
Mm-hmm.
For Christ's sake. But yeah, this week has been a rather lively week in the news and goings on in this great U.S. of A. And we're going to talk about one of the major news points of this week. I would say one of the major points of kind of American history. And we're going to talk about that in the topic segment. I don't want to give away any surprises yet. Before we get into all this stuff, let's get into some news.
Yes, let's.
So I'm going to go not internationally. I want to go nationally for mine. Well, I guess it's a new kind of it's a New York State, but it's New York State law, but it has some national implications. But New York State lawmakers introduced bill to decriminalize sex work.
Yay!
Yeah, a solid step. Need to decriminalize it.
So, if passed, I mean, of course, this can set some, a very powerful precedent as work towards repealing prohibitions against sex work, which people need because sex work needs to be safe and, not demonized and criminalized because, it's work.
Yeah, because people want to talk about preventing trafficking, but shoving sex work into the shadows of illegality is kind of a big part of what empowers human trafficking.
It's actually super interesting. Because one of the reasons I even picked this news story is I'm in a family law class and we've looked up some of the legal definitions of what sex is and what sex work is and this and that. And the law is very behind on pretty much all of that.
Oh, of course it is.
That makes sense to me.
Extremely behind. I'm actually thinking about working on a piece discussing sex, especially kink and sex and the law, because it's all it's a mess. It's a big mess. But
are there still sodomy laws on the books, or did they manage to deal with that in the last decade?
In some states, there still are.
Yeah, there are.
That's what I thought.
They're not. They're mostly just there for show. They're not enforceable.
Yeah, but even still.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a legal definition of sex.
Yeah. But in almost every in almost every state, I think, sadomasochism, BDSM bondage and impact play and all that is legally considered assault, even if it's consensual.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can still be arrested even if your partner is consenting to everything that you do.
because it goes on the whole thing of if something's a crime, even if you consent to it, it's still a crime.
Yeah.
So once again,
So,
the when it comes to kink and sex and sexuality, the law is still very much way behind. Um, so this introduced New York State bill could at least start the conversation up even more.
mhm.
Um, which is, like I said, is very very much needed because I mean, sex itself is still very much stigmatized.
Yeah.
Um, and
Very true.
I mean, we're barely out of the sex should only come through marriage law system. Like that only dissolved probably less than 50 years ago.
Yeah. So going back a couple seconds, in the case of people being charged with assault for BDSM, for consensual BDSM,
Mm-hmm.
is it still something you can get arrested for if the alleged victim is unwilling to press charges?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The DA can
Oh,
press
wow.
charges on the victim's behalf. And that plays into, like, the rationale for that plays a lot into, like, domestic violence issues. Where for whatever
Ah,
Yeah.
reason a victim of domestic violence might be unwilling to press charges, but the state steps in to protect them.
And see,
okay.
and a lot of states have mandated reporting.
Yeah.
So if you went somewhere like to a hospital or something, or even hell, your work, and somebody reported bruises or something, your partner or whoever was involved, despite it being consensual, could still get charged with domestic violence because somebody else had reported it.
Oh, wow, yeah. Once I'm back to teaching, I best make sure none of my students let me know they're into BDSM. Though, like, if they're having those conversations with me, that's already an inappropriate teacher-student relationship.
Yes, that is extremely inappropriate.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a whole hell of a lot of work to be done in that area. Honestly, probably not a lot of people actually focused on that area. That's something I need to look into. But yeah, this New York possible law could be very beneficial.
Mhm.
All right, Ez, you take the next one.
All right, so the next news story is very local to Memphis, and is a little bit lighter since our topic segment is going to be pretty heavy today. So do you guys remember back in February, I brought up that there were 2 petitions out on the books to change the names of streets in Memphis. Y'all remember that? I know that I brought it up.
Yes,
I believe so.
Yeah. So, one of them did not pass. The one to change Main Street to Main Street did not pass.
Yeah.
But the city has now, as of like last week, officially changed the name of Forest Avenue with 2 R's back to the original Forest Avenue with 1 R, which first off is the original name of that street, but also is removing another one of the subtle monuments to the Confederacy.
Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Yes, to Nathan Bedford Forrest, that exists in the city. So I am so sad. I'm so sad that I left Memphis before I got to see that. But
yeah, that's those little things to help stop honoring these fucking horrible ass people, these horrible ass historic people. I dig it. Good on you, Memphis.
yes,
You get one thing. You get one. Side note, speaking of sticking up for horrible people, random side note, you guys hear the Joe Biden stuff this week?
What Joe Biden stuff this week?
This week. He was like went on this whole defensive thing of how cordial and how good it was to work with like segregationists.
Yes, I saw that. I didn't read anything about it, but I saw that it happened.
And everybody has just been like, hey, we don't care that, like, okay, you had to work, like, maybe you did have to work with these people, but you don't pet segregationists on the back. Not former segregationists. Like, you don't, they're bad people. You don't do that. Not if you want to run for president, you piece of shit. Well, never mind. Forgot what world we live in. Forgot what world we live in. Never mind.
Yeah, we apparently live in a world where the only bar is better than Trump.
God damn.
And Biden is trying his hardest not to clear that bar.
Like, what has gotten me is the defense of Biden is just like, after this is like, black people especially have just been like, okay, dude, we can't rock with you. Like, you can't do this. They can't make these kind of statements and expect us to rock with you. And the response is, well, I mean, you gotta vote for him. You got to. He's the option. You gotta vote for him. It's like, fuck out of here. Which this whole conversation actually moves us into our topic segment. So you guys want to move on?
Sure.
So we're going to move on right after some music from our special musical guests. Please enjoy. And welcome back, everyone. So, major news from this past week was that Congress held a hearing on the subject of reparations, bringing some very famous people in to talk about it. People who know what the hell they're talking about it. I never get his name correct, but
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's not my name.
I fuck it up every time. And Danny Glover and a few others went to Congress and were discussing why African Americans should get reparations, which sparks a conversation that has come up many times, which is even more it continues to be more and more poignant. I don't know if you guys have heard some of the responses from people who oppose reparations for African Americans in this congressional hearing. The big one was Mitch McConnell saying, "This turtlenecked fuck," saying that electing Obama was payment for the sins of slavery.
Yeah, clearly. So
that was Mitch McConnell's response. One of the other responses was, we fought the Civil War, so we don't have to give reparations because we freed the slaves, which is basically the equivalent of somebody walking into your house, kidnapping and beating you, letting you go, and then saying, "I'm your hero."
Yeah.
One of the fuckers went, we don't have to give reparations. That's what welfare is for.
The welfare that they're consistently trying to gut.
Yeah, and also, people, it's back on that whole thing of all the old stereotype of all black people are the people who get welfare most often, and all black people are welfare. Fuck out of here! Mm-hmm. Like, you still running that racist bullshit. Anytime you bring anything up, there was all kinds of like things from, oh, well, you guys don't have to deal with slavery now. It's all good now. This and that, which brings us to this conversation, because we're going to talk about reparations and what reparations mean. Because I think people in this conversation, because of the way our capitalist minds think, they think it's all about money, which is wrong. It's not all about money, because honestly, if reparations were paid, and if they were paid equal to what was, like, what is owed, just to be real, that would bankrupt the U.S.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. That would fucking bankrupt the U.S. If it was paid to what it's owed, there would be no money left.
Yeah.
So it's not about money. So we're going to talk about what it is about. But first, I want to. You guys want to hear some? I like to put things in like hard, concrete perspective, so people understand. So you guys want to hear some numbers?
Sure.
Hear some numbers. So, from the onset of the transatlantic slave trade to the Americas, 12.5 million Africans were shipped across the Atlantic. 12.5 million. Out of that 12.5 million Africans shipped across the Atlantic, 10.7 million survived. So almost 2 million never actually made the trip.
Yeah.
So, once in the Americas, slave mothers were on average forced to produce 9 to 10 children, because they wanted a slave trade. They wanted a slave system that could reproduce itself. Because in the early 1800s, the actual slave trade across the Atlantic was outlawed. Now, that doesn't mean the slave trade stopped. It was just officially illegal. Mm-hmm. Because at that point, the slave system could reproduce itself. So, slave mothers were forced to produce, on average, 9 to 10 children. So, you can estimate that about 53 million children were produced. Mm-hmm. So, America's slave system lasted about 350 years. That's about 12 generations.
Oh.
That puts the estimated number of black people involved in the slave system in this country at around 600 million people.
It's a fucking lot of people.
That's a lot of people over 350 years. Now, but they say, well, that was then. Slavery was abolished, right? 1865. Juneteenth just passed. It's all in the past now. But wait, there's more. Ez, you want to tell us about the GI Bill?
Yeah. So the GI Bill. We fought World War II, right? We sent thousands and thousands of men and women, mostly men, but quite a few women, overseas to fight these wars. And when they came home, to reward them for their efforts, we passed a whole bunch of legislation, like the GI Bill, which provided housing assistance. It provided free college education and a whole bunch of other benefits. Right? Wonderful thing to do for this country's veterans. Yes.
Yes.
But guess who did not receive any of those benefits?
Was it black folks?
It was black folks. The GI Bill was only for white soldiers who returned from World War II. Any black soldiers who returned were not eligible for the GI Bill, and so did not receive any of those benefits for their time served during World War II.
So you're saying that black soldiers went and gave their bodies and put themselves through horrible traumas only to come back and receive nothing?
Nothing.
Would you also say that many of them, as they returned home, found themselves often beaten and killed for even wearing the uniform?
Yep.
Because that also happened. And that even wasn't just with World War II. Many black soldiers in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, when they returned home, they were often beaten and mistreated and killed for being black soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
We have hundreds of black people lynched in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Still being lynched today, mind you.
Yes.
Don't like that's gone, because it's not. We have about another 100 years of following the abolition of slavery, about another 100 or so years of legal second-class citizenship. You know, Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And I also like to remind everyone listening that the end of Jim Crow was only about 54 years ago.
Yeah.
So pretty historically recent. Black people make up 13% of the population, of the current population of the United States, yet 40% of the prison population. So out of the 3 million people in prison in the U.S., almost half of those are black. We black people are still dramatically less poorer, have less access to education. Basically, just about every bad social thing and political and economic thing, black people unfortunately suffer it the worst.
Yeah.
All of it, the after effects of slavery. Okay, so those are some numbers on that. But do we have any examples of people of oppressed and oppressed groups getting reparations? Do we? Well, you guys are supposed to go, no, we don't. And
yes,
then I go,
we do.
Yes, there we go.
See, we can't go, no, we don't, because both of us know that is not true.
We're supposed to play along. Anyway.
You didn't give us a script beforehand.
Fair,
if you want us to say certain things, you got to tell us in advance.
Improvise. No. So, as most of us know, around 6 million Jewish people were killed during the Holocaust between 1941 and 1945.
Mm-hmm.
Germany and the United States ended up paying about $33 billion in reparations to the Jewish people and the descendants of those affected by the Holocaust. Also, during World War II, 125,000 Japanese Americans were interned. In response, those Japanese Americans and their families and their descendants got $1.6 billion in reparations. These were responses of genocides in a 5-year period. Now, mind you, the numbers of African Americans and Black people affected by the slave system is 100 times larger.
Yeah.
And over hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Now, but the U.S. felt obligated to pay reparations to the Jewish people and the Japanese people, and they deserved it. They certainly deserved it for what they went through. Even Native Americans got some sort of reparations, even though, goddamn, the U.S. government owes them a lot more.
Yeah.
Like, don't even get me fucking started on that. But at least with those, there was some acknowledgement of there were horrible, horrible things committed against these people, and something needed to be done. With African Americans, that has not happened in the slightest. The civil rights movement wasn't, there were horrible things that happened to these people and they need to be remedied. It was, this system can't openly work like this, so we got to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't eliminate it. It didn't really do anything to alleviate it. It just threw things that it just basically facially wiped it over, painted over it, put some makeup on it. There has been nothing to acknowledge the horrors and the genocide committed against Africans, both during and Africans and African Americans, both during and after the slave trade to today. And it's still going on today. Yet there is no recognition. And anytime the conversation about recognition or doing anything about that comes up, it becomes, well, you've already been freed. Oh, we've already given enough to you. You ain't gave shit. You haven't acknowledged.
Or my favorite argument is, well, that was so long ago, we wouldn't even know who to give money to.
Oh, you don't. Oh, really? Like, may I remind you, people, 54 fucking years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even been that long.
People who were affected under Jim Crow and under the GI Bill discrimination and under all of that are still alive.
They are still alive.
Like,
there are like, for people my age, there are parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like my father's 70. He was certainly a part of Jim Crow. Certainly a victim of Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And frankly, the last generation that remembered being slaves isn't that far gone.
No.
Like
the last living slave, the last slave, like, person who, like, remembered being a part of slavery died in, like, the 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know either, but, like, I know that it's only a few generations back, like, that you'd have to reach to find that shit.
Yeah, I think it was the 80s because that person was like well over 100.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
like, this isn't reaching back to some distant past. This is recent. As many people hate to admit it, it's recent.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, it's so long ago. Also, my favorite argument was why my favorite thing is to always hear, well, that was them. No one today suffers or profits from slavery. Motherfucker, everything you do in this country, everything you enjoy, everything as an American you enjoy is based on the effects of the African slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything in this country been on what this country used to become successful, to grow, was slavery. That's it.
Yeah.
If you remove slavery from the equation, there is no United States. There isn't.
That's
Everything built on the back of slavery. So when you go, who benefits from who has benefited from it? Why should we pay it back? You do. You all do. And white people benefit from it most.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I want you to think about stuff. So housing is still pretty segregated. Majority white neighborhoods usually have higher property values. That means better schools, better education. While black people are generally kept in low-income neighborhoods where their schools get less tax dollars, which means less available education, higher crime rates. But you continue to ask who's benefiting and who's suffering. The pictures are clear. I mean, even think about every major bank in this country. Every major bank in this country, and many major corporations that have lasted over 100 years, and these major institutions, they gained their prominence, gained their money through slavery, through the slave trade. But you're asking who benefits and who suffers. And let's not, every aspect of the United States, every single aspect has been built on enslaving and oppressing black people. Why are we still having this conversation?
Because it is profitable to continue with things as they are for those who have the power and make those decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
which brings me to what I think is the actual point of reparations, because it's not about the money. Like I said earlier, if the U.S. was to pay for 450 years of oppression, to pay for the lives lost, to pay for the horrors, the deaths, the entire system that you have levied against African Americans. And I'm saying African Americans because, God damn it, this is our country and we fucking worked for it. Even if it wasn't our choice, this is ours. It's our blood, sweat, and tears that went into the soil.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, if America was to pay for that, if the U.S. was to pay for that, then the country would be bankrupt. But it's not about the money. Though a lot of people want to make it about the money. It's not about the money. It's about the acknowledgement. You need to... This country and its people needs to acknowledge the things that it's done, the system that it has because of the things that it's done, who profits from it, who suffers from it, and it needs to at least look like you're trying to make up for the sins. It's not the sins of your father, it is your sins. Because as long as you profit for it, you are still a part of it. I was actually having this argument with someone earlier because they were just like, even if money was paid, even if they were like we were given money, that wouldn't fix the income disparities. That wouldn't fix racism. And that's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true. But it's not about the money. And when it comes to income disparities, every little bit counts. It's not going to fix it, but it could help a lot of lives.
Yeah.
A lot of people who it would give a lot of people who don't have as many options more options.
Pay off some people's medical debt.
Right. Help people get better housing. Help people get better education.
Yeah.
Every little bit counts. But even so, it's not about the money. Because there needs to be some kind of mark. There needs to be some kind of something of acknowledgement. You can't run away from it. Because right now we still live in a U.S. that runs away from the horrible things that it's done and continues to do.
Yeah.
And you don't get to run away because we don't get to run away. We don't get to stop being black. We don't get to stop living with the stigma, the stereotypes. We don't get to stop living in fear of being shot, being killed, being murdered, being imprisoned. We don't get to stop. And if we got to live with it, you better damn well live with it too. And see, that's where I fall on it. That's honestly where I fall on it. If we got to live with it, you got to fucking live with it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we as a nation can't grow and get past the mistakes of the past if we don't even, like, try to.
Right.
There's no real attempts to, like, make up for the power disparity that exists as a direct result of people having been enslaved for many generations and then being freed, quote unquote, only to experience a world where there's still less than full people, where they're still locked up.
I always want people to realize there is a such thing as genetic memory. Like, traumas can be passed along in someone's genes.
Yep.
And studies upon studies upon studies have found that African Americans live as a whole, like as a populace, African Americans live with PTSD. PTSD that is a direct result of slavery and its effects. It is literally in our genes, in our genetic makeup now. If you ever want to think about the effects and how it still affects us today, it is literally in our genetic makeup. The horrors that were committed against us and continue to be committed against us.
Mm-hmm.
And all we want is some acknowledgement. That's what Black Lives Matters is about. An acknowledgement that our lives mean something. That you can't just wipe us away. That's what reparations is about. That's what all Black liberation is about. Every movement, every march, every hearing, every academic paper, every book, every poem, everything. It is just about acknowledgement that we are people and that we deserve life and equal life. And the horrors that are and were committed against us need to be acknowledged and remedied, or at least try to remedy. You can't sweep us under a fucking rug, especially when you keep using us.
So many companies depend on prison labor for their Made in America labels.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. And like who drives the media? Like who do you post up in sports and in movies and music?
Yeah.
I mean, for fuck's sake, American music literally came from slaves. And if somebody don't believe me, go fucking look it up.
Yeah. So much of it evolved out of blues.
I'm a music teacher.
Jazz.
I will vouch.
Right.
It all can be traced back, like directly, easily. It can easily and directly be traced back to the music of the slaves. All of it.
Like motherfucker, this country wouldn't have shit without black bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And black lives and black souls.
And instead of acknowledging that, we just continue to steal their labor, their time, their passion.
It always gets me. It always gets me when, like, very intelligent, very well-spoken, and I hate that term because they always use well-spoken as the term of, like, this is not one of the bad Negroes. But
yeah.
Yeah, also articulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
But when very intelligent, very learned black folks get up and start speaking passionately about this stuff, there's always a look. And it's a look of, what are you doing? It's always a look of, how dare you have the audacity to think such things when there is literally blood on your hands? Like, fucking Christ. But yeah, like all this discussion. This has been like, this is the deal with reparations. Whether you believe, and there are a lot of black folks who are against the idea of reparations. Honestly, mostly because their minds have been thoroughly fucked. Just to be real. Because all the black folks that are opposed to reparations, their reasons behind it are racist against black people. Because it's always just like, well, black folks don't need the money because you're not oppressed anymore. Slavery was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just gonna be more welfare, and black people just want to not have to work. And we should all be working.
Yes. Every single one of us must break our backs so that we can live.
Also, side note, if any demographic in this country, and I'm not saying it's true because black people actually work way harder.
Yeah.
They get half as far, but probably work harder than most demographics in this country.
There's a reason the old adage is work twice as hard, get half as far.
Right. But if there's any group of people that should go, you know what? We don't have to work. It should be black folks.
Yeah.
Because look, we already put our time in. Shit, work for us for a little bit. Damn.
And frankly, we could go off on a whole tangent about how, like, we have already gotten to a point where productivity via technology is well beyond levels necessary for people to not actually have to work in order to be able to live and keep society thriving. Like, it's a shit argument all around.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm suddenly also being reminded about so many other horrible things, and now I'm just growing more and more angry.
I mean, we expected that, though.
Yeah. This is absolutely a topic for keen anger. And, like, none of it is unjustified.
Like, all the massacres. The fucking massacres. Black Wall Street, Rosewood. Like, the list goes on and on and on and on.
And it has never stopped.
And they still keep telling us that we don't deserve anything.
That it's all in the past.
That it's all in the exactly. Like,
that it doesn't make any difference anymore. That's too far back in history. But, like, it's real hard to overcome several, like, even ignoring the concept of ancestral memory. Like, it's real hard to overcome several generations of people having just the hugest leg up on such a huge portion of the population.
I'm just imagining. So imagine this. I go to Mitch McConnell's house. I beat his ass, kick his family out, and force his child to be a servant. And I live in that house, and my family lives in that house for another 2 generations. Now, after the first generation, I let that child and their children go. Now, if their children came back to that house and went, "Hey, this is our family's house. You came into our house, beat up my grandfather or great grandfather, stole all our shit, and forced my grandfather to do something, to be a servant." And I went, "It's all in the past. We should hug it out."
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything anymore.
That's the past.
I only usurped your family's position in the social hierarchy and left you with no chance of immediate recovery, and left you with very little chance of recovery.
Now, see, and that's what America does. Except that not only do you tell them, "Hey, we should hug it out, it's all in the past," but after you hug it out, you trip them on the way out the door and kick them.
Yeah. How dare you even bring these things up? You can hug it out, but I'm gonna stay mad. And you brought it up.
And then as they're on the ground, on the concrete, you go, "You brought this on yourself."
Yep. Your fault. Your fault for daring to mention that we should maybe do something about the continued effects of this horrible period of history.
Oh my God. I'm so fucking angry. If anyone wants to read something like really compelling, read The Case for Reparations from Coates. Because it spells everything out for you. You can go look it up. I know you can look it up on the Atlantic website because it's there. You can find a link through it from The Root because I read The Root a lot. There's also you can also get a lot of information from the writings of Henry Louis Gates on like slavery and the numbers and why reparations are needed, and not just needed. They should. Let me take it back. Not just needed. They should be required. Honestly, what I would like to see happen, it will never happen. But it's honestly something I would like to see for everyone. Like I would love a social safety net for everyone.
Yeah.
But for as reparations for Black folks, let's say a monthly stipend for every Black household or every Black person, every Black adult of about $3,000. That'll go a long way.
That'd go a fucking
It
long
would.
way.
It would go a really long way.
You don't have to do that. Go a monthly stipend of food, and not just like rationed food. No, whatever food we want. You better go to like a card that we go to the store and use that to get whatever food we want. That card should also hold money, be able to be used for utilities and rent. There we go. That's reparations right there. You're not giving. You wouldn't just be given. Like if you want to feel better about yourself, so you don't want people to just freeload and whatever. Okay, that's fine. People won't freeload off that. They'll be living. They'll be just surviving. They'll have all their basic needs met, and for any kind of luxuries, they can go work for it. So your little capitalistic dream of people working and doing stuff doesn't go away.
No, but see, the capitalistic dream is that people who don't work don't deserve to survive.
Oh, I know. I know. But they don't want to say that.
So any kind of existence without working is freeloading under capitalism. Yay, capitalism.
And of course, that includes disability benefits.
Yes.
So.
Anyway.
Also, that card I was talking about, free medical care.
I mean, frankly, we should all have free or at least greatly reduced medical care to begin with. But then that's kind of the point of all this.
Here's the thing. That's what I said earlier. Just like, no, we all deserve this.
Yeah,
like,
frankly,
there should be a thing. But if you want to start, you want to test out the social safety net, start with us.
Yeah, start by making it a reparations system.
Right. Start with us.
That's yeah. That's solid ground to start with.
Because if you can use it to uplift the lowest, the people you have deemed to be the least of this society, but then it'll work for everyone else.
Yeah.
But do you guys want to add anything?
I just want to piggyback on your suggestion of free healthcare and point out that while we're talking about reparations, a pretty decent place, if you want to make the argument that reparations, like who do we even give reparations to? How do we know? Look at the environmental toxins that Black communities have been exposed to, even as recently as right now, right? That are causing physical and neurological damage to Black people in America right now, right? Water systems, there's toxic heavy metals in water systems. There's toxic waste being dumped in Black neighborhoods. There's there are factories and plants that exist in historically Black neighborhoods that are poisoning the air and the soil that these kids play in, and these things, in addition to generational memory of trauma, these are things actual health risks, actual health damage that is going to be passed down, and that is going to be part of these families for forever. So you want to start with some reparations for some people that you can actually prove need it. Start with some health care for people who live in these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Right.
Why the hell not?
Because
you can't say that there's not a clear victims of damage, and the damage is happening. It is demonstrable damage that is happening right now.
You very damn right.
Not to mention reparations for the families of people who were wrongfully killed by police or wrongfully jailed.
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of avenues we could pursue in that direction. And that heavy metal poisoning in water supplies, that really isn't a joke. That can carry some very severe effects on a person developmentally, physically, mentally. Just, it follows them their entire life.
Yeah, okay. So you want to talk about the stereotype of Black people being not intellectual and being aggressive? You know what causes intellectual disabilities and aggression?
Lead poisoning in water.
Heavy metal poisoning.
Yeah.
Right?
Lead-based paint in the house you grew up in.
You can't create a problem and then use the problem that you created to stereotype an entire group of people.
I mean, you can, because they did it.
Clearly you can, but that's not just. It's not fair, and you carry some responsibility for making it right, for fixing that. Yeah,
and that's ultimately where this particular white-ass person feels the need to support reparations. At its very core, you may not feel responsible for slavery, but certainly as a person who wants to believe that you're good, you must feel some kind of responsibility for the continued injustices that plague specifically Black people in our society. And reparations are a step toward correcting those issues. Targeting specifically the things that are affecting the worse off among us is a great way to get the ball rolling on improving society as a whole and actually making us a just nation.
That's the thing, though. They don't want justice. They want just us.
Yeah. I mean, they don't actually want just them. They want just them to truly prosper, but they want people they can exploit, obviously, because otherwise their means of prospering are no longer there. And by they, the same people who have been benefiting from this shit for all these generations.
Mm-hmm.
For centuries.
Yes. And before anybody tries to get weird and spin this in a direction, I do not mean some cabal of several generations of Jewish people.
Yep.
I mean the white-ass Anglo folks
Guys,
that
that's
are...
not a thing. Let's throw it out there. That's not a thing.
No.
There are no secret cabals of Jewish people running the country. If there's a secret cabal of any people, they're all white. That's just to be real. Like, Jewish people are still very much a minority and still not, well, while not as oppressed as in the past, still very much an oppressed minority.
I mean, like, depending on where you're looking, what you're talking about, I'd argue that they aren't even really less oppressed than they used to be. I mean, certainly we don't have the events of the 40s continuing so blatantly, but
like in terms of like how America defines whiteness, that's what I meant by not as bad as it used to be, ?
Yeah.
But yeah, no secret cabals. Also, side note for the black folks, because thank you, Ari, for bringing that up, because I need to drop this before I go. To the black folks who are talking about reparations, yes, it is okay, very much, to compare the argument for reparations to the reparations given to the Jewish people following the Holocaust. However, that is not an excuse for anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
You don't go, well, they got it. Why does everybody love them? They must be in control of everything.
Yeah. No.
That's
all
not
those bullshit anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are just there to garner support for fascist movements.
And just
like,
a lot of the seeds of anti-Semitism that have been planted in the black community were not planted there by black people.
Assuredly not.
Because I was going to say, early on, very much early on, and still in a lot of places, the black community and the Jewish communities were very much linked.
In fact, the concept of a ghetto originates in, like, sequestering off Jewish people.
Right. So, like, we've generally been together in most things. Like, the animosity that has arisen is something that is manufactured.
Yeah. It doesn't benefit you. It only benefits the powerful. And again, by powerful, I don't mean secret cabal of Jewish people.
Right.
Like, there are absolutely powerful Jewish people in the world. There isn't some secret society of Jewish people pulling all the strings. I'm sorry. I'm not actually sorry about that at all.
Also, another side note, white folks. Anytime you see one wealthy black person, you cannot use that as proof that black people aren't suffering and don't need reparations.
Yeah. That's like going to a neighborhood being like, why on earth does this person whose house burned down need help? Look at this house over here. It's doing great. Like,
but
one house just got a swimming pool involved. We don't have to worry about this house that just burned down.
But Jay-Z and Beyonce are billionaires. Fuck out of here.
Yeah. a handful of people overcoming tremendous odds against them is
Like,
not.
I also read this very interesting article about about Jay-Z, and it's basically how Jay-Z's success wasn't because people always talk about, well, if Jay-Z can do it, anyone can do it, and Jay-Z pulled himself up from the ghetto and did this and that. Like, Jay-Z didn't just work his way up. Jay-Z got extraordinarily lucky. Like, what lucky breaks you could get when it comes to his career path, he got. It wasn't just like, oh, I worked and did this. No. Doors opened for him that don't open for other people. But I digress. I think we're done with this reparations conversation.
Yeah.
And we're going to move into our sex segment, where we're going to talk about sex reparations. No, I'm just playing.
Honestly, I have an anecdote about that if we want to throw it in for the sex segment.
That is a side note, but this is one of my favorite things to get my way, which never works.
Also, it's
one of my favorite things to get my way is I'll ask for something, and then when somebody says no, I go, but reparations.
Yeah, you do that a lot.
Yeah, and it works as a joke, but I know of at least one white person who exists who subs for black men and tries to pretend that counts as reparations.
Okay, we got to cut this conversation, and we're gonna move that to the sex segment because I got to hear this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sex segment.
I mean, the story is basically just what I said, but still.
Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna still move to the sex segment. Jesus Christ. We're gonna move to the sex segment after some more music. Enjoy.
The streets, running out with fear. No one can tell what is wrong with them. Don't die with the other side, because if you do, we'll find you. Wanna know exactly if you lack the iron when this is the voice of goodness, and you gotta believe it's the voice of goodness. Come on and find it right now. With our own people, can't walk the streets alone. Walk to the city, this is what they get back. Live the lives in business, no business belongs to the drug dealers. No time to the business kids, fuck their city back. This is the voice of business, and you better believe it's the voice of business. You wanna find them right now. Keep us quiet. Try to blame our city like the legions of the nation. We won't give up quickly. We're gonna stand in fight. And this is the voice of business. And you gotta believe in the voice of business. You wanna find a back out the voice of business. And you gotta believe in the voice of business. Come on, get the way down. Fucking drug dealer scum.
And welcome everyone to the sex segment, where today we are going to be talking about race play.
Oh.
Which is complicated. So we're going to talk about it. So race play is primarily found in kink. but it is a dynamic where the race of the people involved in the dynamic is like explicitly addressed and is part of the dynamic, to the often, usually I would argue, to the point of racial fetishization. That's my perspective on it.
Oh no, it's your perspective. It is also a very correct perspective.
Yeah. Right. I just want to say off the bat that this is not something that I participate in. It makes me really uncomfortable to approach a dynamic with that kind of mindset. I have a really hard time with it. But it is something that is not super duper prominent, but definitely very visible in the kink and BDSM scenes, like in the communities. So it seems
problematic as fuck.
Yeah. Right. And here's the thing, right? Which is, if you like consent is everything. If you want to engage in a dynamic with somebody, with a racial dynamic with somebody where that's explicitly part of it, and you're role playing, whatever, blah blah blah, with that in mind, and you both are on the same page about it, and you both consent to it, and you both know what you're getting out of it, you know what the other person is getting out of it. Like, I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong, right? If you know what you're doing and you consent to it and all of that. But also, I think a lot of people enter into these dynamics for reasons that I would disagree with. But that's just me.
There's also the thing with consent is, and this is another way it gets super problematic. A lot of race play is based on a lot of negative stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's consensual or not, a lot of the time you are perpetuating those stereotypes, which isn't good.
Yeah.
And for the person, usually black person, just let's be real in this, for the black person involved, they are, even with consent, they are internalizing negative stereotypes, negative racial stereotypes, which I said, it's not good. Like, this is one of those instances where, while you don't kink shame, you might want to think about what you're doing and the impact what you are doing has, even if you want to do it. Like,
Yeah.
even if you're practicing safely and there's consent and this and that, this is one of those situations where you might should take some reflection time outside of play to get an understanding of what you are doing on not just a personal level, but on a larger level, because that can inform what you're doing.
Yeah. And it can inform, if these are types of play that you are doing in public, like, a lot of people don't have access to a lot of this equipment outside of a public dungeon. Like, the types of play that you do and the types of dynamics that you model affect not just your own internal state and that of your partner, but it also can have a tangible effect on how other people think it's appropriate to treat you.
Right.
Right. I've talked to submissives who are black who don't, or people who like to bottom who are black who don't like to bottom in public to white dominance or white tops, because it perpetuates this like cultural script that we've got, and they're like, no, I'm not okay with people seeing that.
Honestly, that's one of the many reasons I very much stick to being a top slash like being more dominant, because it would feel weird to me if a white person was in that role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So at the same time, amongst the gay community, there's a weird unchecked kind of cultural assumption when it comes to topping and bottoming sometimes, where like the bottom, which like it's a huge reversal from certain historical societies and their views of topping and bottoming, but like this is what it is now. There's this sort of cultural assumption that bottoming is the more enlightened position. Like, if you are more intellectual, less physical, more sensitive, then bottoming is the place for you. And, and then that gets like tied up in racial stereotypes occasionally. Black
Right.
men are kind of assumed to be tops because the top is the physical, savage, meat-headed one.
the bull.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, which, when we're talking about kink and BDSM, bull means something different.
Yeah, true, but not like historically. The stereotype.
But also that all gets mixed up with a whole other racial component also sometimes, and so it's all connected.
So
Yeah.
Speaking of which, side story. So I was talking to someone earlier this week about we were talking about. So two things. One, I was watching this other conversation where this guy was talking about a gangbang, and they asked, like, these were white people, and they asked him, like, why is it a gang? Like what makes it a gangbang and not like just an orgy? And his reply was like clockwork. Well, I mean, it was a bunch of black guys.
Ooh.
And the response from the other white people was like, what does their race have to do with it?
Exactly.
And his response was, well, they just kept calling it a gangbang. So, like, there's already a idea that scenario, a gangbang, quote unquote, which I don't like using that word because of the stereotypical, the negative, like racial stereotypes associated with the word gangbanging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Though I always thought that the distinction in terms there was like for a gangbang, you've got like one bottom or one submissive to a bunch of tops or
so
dominance.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I always used it.
Because of the racial racial stereotypes outside of the community, as well as what certain people do with the Mandingo parties.
Duh.
Oh, right, that shit.
It comes back around where now the sex-related gangbang ties back into the non-sex-related racial connotation of gangbang, and then you have a problem. So that happened first. Then later on, I was having discussion with someone who we were talking about like them being interested in like having a situation with like multiple like men, and they said they always felt weird about it because because of it felt like there would be a racial connotation to it because of what I was just saying about gangbanging, and also that they knew of a group of black men in the kink community who offer their services for people looking for Mandingo parties.
Yeah, no, dude, there's a bunch of them.
So there's a lot of internalized, there's a lot of external racial, like race play and the issues that come with it, but a lot of internalized shit. Like the concepts of, I know people hear this all the time, but BBC
Yeah.
and for fuck's sake, one of the most famous black male porn stars, porn name is Mandingo. Like, while for, and this is speaking like to black people, black men especially, while those things seem like good things, like, oh, well, people want me because I'm a big black man and I got this huge penis, quote unquote, which it, look, just to be real, like it's not a real thing. Not every black man is well endowed. It shouldn't fucking matter anyway.
Yeah.
But like that idea that a lot of black men are very, very proud of is one that comes from a negative racial connotation. Because the idea is you have a big penis because you're closer to an animal.
Yeah, essentially. Because that used to be the way we viewed those things.
Right.
It used to be that larger genitalia were indications that one was closer to savagery.
Which is a whole problematic term in and of itself.
Right.
Absolutely.
And even with like for people like black people who identify as women, the fetishization of very large asses, that also comes from negative racial stereotypes, negative racial connotations. You have enlarged like stuff because you're closer to an animal.
Yeah.
Go look up the story of Sarah Bartman, a woman they literally kept locked up and paraded around Europe because of her large butt.
Yep.
Like these things that we attribute, that comes up very often in race play, that we attribute, that black people have often attributed as being something good, they come from really problematic places, which is something you really need to be aware of. Because the more we are not aware of it, the more they become even more okay to the general populace.
Yep.
So, yeah. I think I might have hijacked your sex.
No, that's fine.
I mean, considering the chosen topic, I assume it was expected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've even fallen victim to that before. Just to be real, like I've fallen victim to it. Like, but once I realized what was up, I went, no, not okay with that. Also, It's not okay to say at any point, and pardon my language, because it keeps going up. But fuck me with that nigger dick is not. I don't know why that's a thing.
Yeah.
But for future reference, just because you're in the heat of passion, if somebody pulls that shit on me, I'm leaving.
Yeah, like if somebody accidentally says a racial slur, it's because they're used to saying racial slurs.
Right.
Like,
sex is not an N-word pass.
No.
Yeah. And similarly, sex is not reparations.
Sex is not reparations.
Bottoming, like, as was mentioned at the end of the topic segment, you cannot, as a white man, sub for black men and say that is some kind of, like, moral choice you have made. It's just you getting your rocks off. And you've chosen to attach this racial thing to it because you want to feel good about yourself, and it's fucked up.
Right. The idea of someone going, It's okay. I bought them for black people, or I bought them for black men. I'm doing my part. What?
Yeah, that's not doing anything to change society.
Taking
You
people
and
apart, like it's that's not how you're solving racial inequality here.
no, certainly not. You may be making somebody feel good for a night, but that doesn't really improve their life in any meaningful way beyond that night.
Fucking Christ, that blows my mind. And I'm pretty sure, and I'm sure that's way more common than, especially amongst the quote unquote woke community.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's super fucking common. Just like,
Yeah, subbing for black men so that you can alleviate your white guilt.
goddamn.
I'm absolutely certain that is a more common thing than we have necessarily experienced in our day-to-day. Because I assume that, to an extent, that's something that goes kind of untalked about.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that wouldn't be talked about as much.
I mean, some people are foolish enough to proudly talk about that as though they're actually making a difference. But
I'm fucking for freedom is what I'm doing.
yeah, like, I mean, if you can actually devise a way to ensure your sex actually has radical effects in the world at large, then, like, more power to you. I'd love to share notes, but just being like, oh, disadvantaged person, you can fuck me. That doesn't do it.
Look, if you want your sex to help the world at large, here's what we do: get a bunch of people together, go on the White House steps, massive orgy, like the queerest orgy the world has ever seen, right on the White House steps. And when the police come, we fend them off with sex toys, cocks, not Glocks.
I've got the perfect toy for this situation.
No, that thing is not a sex toy. That thing is a weapon.
It can be both.
It can be both.
I am waiting for it to like fucking transform and turn into a gun or some shit. I've seen Transformers. That thing is from Cybertron. I know it. Anyway, so with that, we're going to end our show. You can find us on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, and where other fine podcasts are found, and support us at patreon.com/The Out of Horses Podcast. Special thanks to our musical guests and to all your lovely faces. This has been Keem, Esme, and Ari, and we are out.
But there are these things that matter, and they really fucking matter. There's like 4 things that matter, and they really fucking matter. I mean, objectively, I mean, you should care, especially you, if you thought about it for 5 fucking minutes.